The North Atlantic, February 3, 1943. One ship. One torpedo. 67 seconds. That is all it takes for chaos to erupt, for a troop transport to become a tomb. A German U-boat's deadly precision plunges over 900 souls into an unimaginable struggle against the freezing sea. But amidst the terror and the desperate fight for survival, a different kind of defiance emerges, a quiet courage that transcends the roar of the ocean and the chill of impending death. How do some men find the strength to offer hope when all hope seems lost? The stage is set in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the North Atlantic. On January 23, 1943, the SS Dorchester, a converted luxury coastal liner now serving as an army transport, departs from New York Harbor. Its destination: an American base in Narsarsuaq, southern Greenland. Aboard are 904 individuals, 597 soldiers, 171 civilian workers, 130 crew members, and 23 Navy armed guards. They are part of convoy SG-19, a small flotilla of 6 ships, including 2 other merchant vessels, the SS Lutz and the SS Biscaya, and 3 U.S. Coast Guard cutters, the Tampa, Escanaba, and Comanche, acting as escorts. Among the Army personnel is Lieutenant George Lansing Fox, a Methodist minister and one of the 4 chaplains on board. Born on March 15, 1900, in Lewistown, Pennsylvania, George Fox is no stranger to service or hardship. At the age of 17, he lied about his age to enlist in the U.S. Army during World War I, serving on the Western Front as a medical orderly. For his meritorious service, he earns the Silver Star, the Purple Heart, and the French Croix de Guerre. After the Great War, George Fox returns home, marries, and his son, Wyatt Ray, is born in 1924. He pursues his education, studying at the Moody Bible Institute and earning a Bachelor of Arts from Illinois Wesleyan University in 1931. He then becomes an itinerant Methodist preacher, serving parishes in Illinois and New Hampshire, before receiving a Bachelor of Sacred Theology from Boston University School of Theology in 1934 and becoming an ordained Methodist minister. When the United States enters World War II, George Fox, at 42 years old, volunteers again for military service, accepting his appointment as an Army chaplain on July 24, 1942, and beginning active duty on August 8, 1942. He completes the Army Chaplain School at Harvard University, preparing for assignments in the European theater. Before boarding the Dorchester, he is reunited with his fellow chaplains, Lieutenant Alexander D. Good, Lieutenant Clark V. Pulling, and Lieutenant John P. Washington, at Camp Miles Standish in Taunton, Massachusetts. These 4 men, representing different faiths, Methodist, Jewish, Dutch Reformed, and Roman Catholic, are bound by a shared mission to provide spiritual guidance and comfort to the troops. The journey across the North Atlantic is fraught with peril. German U-boats relentlessly patrol these vital sea lanes, making every convoy a potential target. The frigid waters themselves are a formidable enemy, with temperatures barely above freezing, promising swift hypothermia to anyone unfortunate enough to fall in. On February 2, the day before the disaster, the convoy's captain, Hans J. Danielson of the Dorchester, receives an alarming report. The Coast Guard cutter Tampa has detected a submarine with its sonar. This chilling intelligence confirms their presence in dangerous waters. Captain Danielson, a cautious man, immediately orders all men to sleep in their clothing and to keep their life jackets close at hand. Yet, the realities of life aboard a crowded troop transport make compliance difficult. Below decks, the ship's engines generate significant heat, making sleeping in full uniform uncomfortable. Many soldiers, seeking a moment of respite from the stifling conditions, disregard the order. They remove their bulky life jackets, finding them awkward and restrictive, opting for a brief comfort that will soon prove tragically costly. The Dorchester, a vessel of 5,649 gross tons, is not designed for such conditions, nor for the rapid evacuation of so many men in an emergency. Its conversion from a luxury liner to a troop transport means compromises in space and safety protocols for its wartime role. The convoy, designated SG-19, steams forward, its three escort cutters, the Tampa, Escanaba, and Comanche, doing their best to protect the transports. But the vastness of the Atlantic and the stealth of the U-boats mean that even the most vigilant escort cannot guarantee absolute safety. The Coast Guard cutters are relatively small, with the Escanaba and Comanche measuring 165 feet in length, and the Tampa at 240 feet. Their sonar capabilities, while present, are not infallible, and the German submarines are skilled hunters. The men aboard the Dorchester are just 150 miles from their destination in Greenland, a mere few hours away from the relative safety of an American base and the promise of air cover. They are about to be proven catastrophically wrong in their hopes for a safe arrival. The clock ticks past midnight on February 3, 1943. The USAT Dorchester, carrying 904 souls, cuts through the icy Labrador Sea. The air temperature hovers at a brutal 36 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 degrees Celsius, and the water temperature is an even more lethal 34 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 degree Celsius. Below the waves, a silent predator stalks its prey. At precisely 12:55 a.m., the German submarine U-223, under the command of Oberleutnant Karl Jürg Wachter, launches its attack. A fan of torpedoes streaks through the dark water. One strikes the Dorchester on its starboard side, amidship, directly into the machinery spaces near the engine room. The impact is catastrophic. A massive explosion rips through the vessel, instantly killing dozens in the lower decks. The force of the blast throws soldiers from their bunks. Within seconds, the ship's electrical supply is destroyed, plunging the entire vessel into absolute darkness. The engines die, and suffocating clouds of steam and ammonia gas begin to fill the passageways. The Dorchester immediately begins to list heavily to starboard, taking on water at an alarming rate. Panic erupts. Men, stunned and disoriented, grope in the pitch black. Those who had ignored the order to sleep in their clothing and wear life jackets now stumble from their racks, half-dressed, confronted by the icy Arctic air as they rush topside. The ship's whistle blasts frantically, but the sound is soon overwhelmed by the shriek of escaping steam and the terrified cries of men. Lieutenant George Fox and his fellow chaplains, Lieutenant Alexander Good, Lieutenant Clark Pulling, and Lieutenant John Washington, are awake when the torpedo strikes. They immediately spring into action, moving through the pandemonium. Their calm voices cut through the fear, offering reassurance and direction. They spread out, tending to the wounded, calming the frightened, and guiding the disoriented toward the deck and the few available lifeboats. Many men, in their haste and terror, have forgotten their life jackets. George Fox, Alexander Good, Clark Pulling, and John Washington locate a storage locker filled with life jackets on deck. They begin distributing them to the desperate soldiers. They work tirelessly, passing out the buoyant vests, urging men to put them on, to prepare for the inevitable plunge into the freezing ocean. Aboard the German submarine U-223, approximately 150 miles west of Cape Farewell, Greenland, Oberleutnant Karl Jürg Wachter's crew experiences a moment of grim satisfaction. The watch officer confirms the successful hit at 0:55 hours. The distinct sound of an explosion echoes through the hydrophones, followed by the unmistakable noises of a sinking ship. The U-boat, which had approached the convoy on the surface before diving to attack, now moves to evade detection. Wachter understands the vital importance of troop transports to the Allied war effort. His orders are clear: disrupt the flow of men and material across the Atlantic. The sinking of a large vessel like the Dorchester, even if its specific cargo and passenger count are unknown, represents a significant victory in the ongoing Battle of the Atlantic. The crew prepares for a potential counterattack from the escorting cutters, but for now, the mission is accomplished. They believe they have delivered a decisive blow, likely against a supply ship, unaware of the immense human tragedy unfolding above and the extraordinary acts of sacrifice occurring on the doomed vessel. The Dorchester continues its rapid descent. The list becomes more severe, making it incredibly difficult to launch the remaining lifeboats. Of the 14 lifeboats on board, only 2 are successfully launched. Many are damaged by the explosion or rendered unusable by the ship's severe tilt. Overcrowding becomes another deadly factor, with some lifeboats capsizing as desperate men leap into them. Private William B. Bednar, a survivor, later recounts the horrifying scene. "I could hear men crying, pleading, praying. I could also hear the chaplains preaching courage. Their voices were the only thing that kept me going. The supply of life jackets dwindles rapidly. Soon, the locker is empty. Yet, there are still men, young soldiers, standing on the deck, shivering, panicked, without a life jacket." George Fox and his fellow chaplains witness this desperate need. Without hesitation, they removed their own life jackets. George Fox hands his life jacket to a young man. Lieutenant Alexander Good gives his to another. Lieutenant Clark Poling and Lieutenant John Washington do the same. They do not ask about faith or denomination. They simply give their only means of survival to the next man in line, prioritizing the lives of others over their own. What does it tell you about a man that he made that choice with everything to lose? Tell me in the comments. The frigid water rushes into the ship's compartments. The Dorchester is sinking fast. It will be completely submerged in approximately 25 to 30 minutes from the time of impact. Men jump into the icy sea, some clinging to rafts, others to debris, many simply floating in the oil-smeared water. The 3 U.S. Coast Guard cutters, the Tampa, Escanaba, and Comanche, are alerted to the disaster. The Comanche spots the flash of the explosion and immediately responds. However, due to the loss of power on the Dorchester, no radio distress signal is sent, and no flares are launched, leaving the escorts to rely on visual cues and their own initiative. The commander of the overall convoy faces a terrible decision. The threat of another U-boat attack is very real. To stop all ships for a full-scale rescue operation risks exposing the remaining transports to further torpedo strikes. The USCGC Tampa, prioritizing the safety of the rest of the convoy, continues its escort duty. But the USCGC Escanaba and Comanche break formation. They race through the heavy seas, determined to save as many as possible. The rescue efforts are harrowing. Survivors in the water are stiff from the extreme cold, many unable to grasp the cargo nets lowered by the cutters. The Escanaba employs a new retriever technique. Swimmers in wetsuits brave the icy water, securing lines to victims so they can be hauled aboard. This innovative and courageous method helps to pull more men from the clutches of hypothermia. Aboard the Escanaba, 133 men are rescued, though one later succumbs to exposure-related injuries. The Comanche rescues 97 survivors. The combined efforts of these 2 cutters bring 230 men to safety. But the vast majority, 675 men, perish in the icy depths of the Atlantic. The sinking of the Dorchester becomes the worst single loss of American personnel of any American convoy during World War II. As the Dorchester's bow rises high into the air, its stern slips beneath the waves. Survivors in nearby rafts and lifeboats witness a sight that will forever be etched into their memories. On the slanting deck, standing together, arms linked, are George Fox, Alexander Good, Clark Poling, and John Washington. Their voices, clear and strong, rise above the roar of the sinking ship and the cries of the dying. They are heard offering prayers and singing hymns. If you had been on that ship, facing those conditions, what would have been your final thoughts? Tell me in the comments. The water engulfs them. George Fox, Alexander Good, Clark Poling, and John Washington go down with the ship, united in their final act of selfless devotion. The ordeal for survivors continues for hours in the freezing water. Many who initially survived the torpedo blast and the sinking succumb to hypothermia before rescue ships can reach them. Some men, coated in thick fuel oil, find a temporary, albeit gruesome, insulation that allows them to survive for up to 8 hours in the frigid water. The sheer number of bodies floating in the water, kept afloat by their life jackets, is a grim testament to the scale of the disaster. The rescue operations are not without their own dangers. The Coast Guard cutter Escanaba, after its heroic rescue mission, will itself sink 4 months later, on June 13, 1943, during convoy duty in the North Atlantic, with only 2 survivors. The sea, in its indifferent power, claims more lives. The story of the Dorchester's sinking and the chaplain's sacrifice quickly spreads among the survivors and then to the United States. The nation is stunned by the magnitude of the tragedy and the incredible heroism displayed by George Fox and his fellow chaplains. Their actions become a powerful symbol of courage and interfaith unity in the face of unimaginable adversity. The testimonies of survivors like John Ladd are crucial in understanding the depth of their sacrifice. Ladd states, "It was the finest thing I have seen or hope to see this side of heaven." Another survivor, Grady Clark, recounts, "As I swam away from the ship, I looked back. The flares had lighted everything. The bow came up high and she slid under. The last thing I saw, the 4 chaplains were up there praying for the safety of the men. They had done everything they could." This moment, frozen in the collective memory of the survivors, elevates the chaplain's actions beyond mere duty. It speaks to a profound human capacity for empathy and self-sacrifice. They are not combatants, yet they face death with a resolve equal to any soldier on the front lines, their weapons being faith and compassion. Their final moments, linked arm in arm, praying, embody a spiritual strength that defies the physical destruction around them. Which side of this story do you think history got wrong? Tell me in the comments. The memory of the Dorchester serves as a stark reminder of the brutal realities of the Battle of the Atlantic, a relentless struggle for control of the vital shipping lanes that supplied the Allied war effort. Every convoy, every ship, every sailor and soldier who braved these waters faced the constant threat of the U-boat wolfpacks. The cold, the darkness, the sudden violence of a torpedo strike, these were the omnipresent dangers. The chaplains understood this. They had spent their time on board comforting nervous young soldiers, sharing soda crackers to ease seasickness, and even putting on evening variety shows to help pass the anxious hours. They were spiritual guides, but also companions in fear and uncertainty. Their training at the Army Chaplain School at Harvard prepared them for the spiritual and emotional challenges of war, but nothing could fully prepare them for the sudden, overwhelming horror of the Dorchester's final moments. The details of the sinking are meticulously pieced together from survivor accounts. The initial explosion, the immediate loss of power, the frantic scramble for lifeboats, all paint a picture of utter chaos. The failure to send a radio distress signal or launch flares means that the escorting cutters are initially unaware of the full extent of the disaster. They see the flash of the torpedo, but the communication blackout prevents a coordinated, immediate response. This delay, however brief, costs precious lives in the freezing water. The decision by the USCGC Tampa to continue escorting the remaining ships, while strategically sound to protect the convoy, highlights the agonizing choices faced by commanders in wartime. The lives of some must be weighed against the safety of many. The chaplains' actions are not impulsive, but a culmination of their commitment to their calling. They move with purpose, organizing, guiding, and comforting. They are a beacon in the darkness, their presence a testament to unwavering faith and duty. As the ship groans and lists, they remain steadfast, tending to the wounded and encouraging those paralyzed by fear. Their composure in the face of certain death inspires those around them, transforming a scene of terror into one of profound human connection. The sight of them, linking arms, becomes an indelible image of heroic sacrifice. The USAT Dorchester groans, a death rattle echoing through its collapsing structure. The stern rises steeply, an impossible angle against the dark, churning ocean. The last available lifeboats are away, bobbing precariously in the frigid water, filled with shivering, oil-slicked survivors. But on the slanting deck, perhaps 40 feet above the waterline, stand Lieutenant George Fox, Lieutenant Alexander Good, Lieutenant Clark Poling, and Lieutenant John Washington. They are the only ones left, or so it seems, among those who still hold out hope for rescue from the ship itself. They have no life jackets. They gave them away. The icy spray of the North Atlantic lashes at them as the ship's bow points almost vertically towards the overcast sky. The sounds are deafening. The shriek of metal tearing, the gurgle of tons of water rushing into the hull, the distant cries of men in the water. Yet, above it all, a different sound emerges from the small group on the deck. George Fox, Alexander Good, Clark Pulling, and John Washington link their arms together. They brace themselves against the violent tilt of the deck. Their heads bow slightly, not in surrender, but in a shared moment of profound prayer. Their voices, clear and resonant, begin to rise, first in individual prayers, then blending into a unified chorus of hymns. They pray for the men they have helped save, for those still struggling in the water, and for those who have already perished. They pray for peace, for comfort, for salvation. Survivor John Ladd, from his bobbing lifeboat, watches in stunned silence. The flares from the rescue cutters illuminate the scene, casting an ethereal glow on the four figures. He sees them, distinct and resolute, as the Dorchester's stern disappears beneath the waves. The ship slides under, swiftly, silently, taking with it 675 souls, including George Fox and his 3 unwavering companions. The last image seared into the minds of those who witness it is not of panic or despair, but of linked arms, bowed heads, and voices raised in a final, defiant act of faith and love. They vanish into the depths, leaving behind an indelible testament to the enduring power of selfless courage. The story of Lieutenant George Fox and the 3 other chaplains of the USAT Dorchester resonates deeply through history, becoming one of the most poignant narratives of World War II. Their sacrifice is not immediately forgotten. The news of their heroism spreads, captivating a nation stunned by the tragedy of the Dorchester's sinking. In the years that follow, their actions become a powerful symbol of interfaith unity and selfless service. George Fox, Alexander Good, Clark Pulling, and John Washington are posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross and the Purple Heart. Congress, recognizing the extraordinary nature of their sacrifice, later authorizes a special, one-time medal, the Chaplain's Medal for Heroism, to be presented to their next of kin. This medal is specifically created to hold the same weight and importance as the Medal of Honor, an honor they were ineligible for as they had not engaged in combat with the enemy. President Dwight D. Eisenhower awards these medals on January 18, 1961. February 3 is officially designated as Four Chaplains Day, commemorating their act of heroism and sacrifice. Across the United States, memorials are dedicated to their memory, including chapels, stained glass windows, and plaques. The Four Chaplains Memorial Foundation is established, continuing to educate the public about their story and advocating for acts of selfless service. The legacy of George Fox and the immortal chaplains extends beyond their individual faiths, embodying the core mission of the Army Chaplain Corps: to serve others with unwavering devotion, especially in times of crisis. Their story is a powerful reminder that in the darkest moments, humanity can find its greatest light through acts of profound love and sacrifice, bridging divides and uniting people in a shared purpose. Their actions on that freezing February night continue to inspire generations, demonstrating that true heroism often lies not in taking a life, but in giving one's own to save another. Perhaps the most unexpected fact about this story is that despite the unprecedented heroism and the creation of a special medal by Congress, the German submarine U-223, responsible for the attack, evaded immediate pursuit and continued its patrols. It was eventually sunk over a year later, on March 30, 1944, in the Mediterranean Sea, by depth charges from British destroyers, including HMS Laforie and HMS Tumult, far from the icy waters where the Dorchester met its tragic end. If this story moved you, if you think these men deserve to be remembered, leave one word in the comments: honor. Subscribe for a new forgotten story every week.